A concerted effort to make you more compliant? Now, what if I was to tell you that there was such an effort that came down to whether or not if you use your left or your right hand? We're going to talk about this. I think you're going to find this quite fascinating. First of all, why does it seem that most people are born right-handed? Well, they have looked into this, they meaning scientists, and they have concluded that it really comes down to genetics. It really comes down to development of a child inside its mom and all of that. And it comes down to, most children tend to be right-handed. Now, for those that are born who are lean towards being left-handed, it's just a genetic thing. It doesn't necessarily mean one is better than the other. That's just genetics. It's like the difference between someone being born with a certain color hair, blonde hair versus dark hair or red hair or whatever. They have determined that from everything that they have found that it really comes down to genetics.
Man, so what's the big deal as far as the left and the right hand?
Well, one of the things we've been talking about in our series, Real Intelligence, and I do hope you get the opportunity to follow that series. That's what we're doing over on our Samba Tree YouTube page. Go check it out. It's a free course that we're teaching, and it's open for everybody. One of the things we covered, because we're just starting out, we pointed out the fact that the brain has two hemispheres. It has the left hemisphere and it has the right hemisphere. Now, with these hemispheres, you would think that the right hemisphere controls the right side of the body and the left hemisphere controls the left side of the body. No, not exactly. Let me kind of straighten that out real quick. Now, because of the contralateral wiring of our brains, the way it kind of works, just think of it like this. So it's the motor cortex of the left side of the brain is actually controlling the motor's function of your right hand. The right side of the right hemisphere, the motor cortex of the right hemisphere is controlling the left side, the left motion of your body, of your hands, of your legs, and all of that. So that's a way to look at it. So it's kind of like cross. So it's really fascinating. Now we're going to get into a little bit more details because of these two hemispheres, because when it comes to these hemispheres, they have some specific functions, but they share those functions at the same time. But we'll get into that. I'll make that a lot clearer, because that is really going to be the crux of everything I'm talking about here in this video. Now, this whole right and left hand thing, you know where it actually started? It goes all the way back to the days of ancient times when the Bible was being formulated and created. And in fact, you see this preference for left and right hand right within scriptures.
He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Matthew 25:33. Your right hand, O Lord, glorious in power. Ecstasies 15-6.
And then when you read the writings of early church fathers like St. Augustine, they too reflected what was in scriptures, and they made it very clear that the right hand was the way to go. In fact, they framed it as divine ordo, which means righteousness or order. And then the left hand was framed as inornato, which means disorder, basically the total opposite, represented things that God didn't like. So the right hand basically was really depicted as God's salvation and truthfulness and righteousness and all of that. And the left hand, well, you didn't want to be on God's left hand. So this really started going back in ancient times through, biblical interpretation, and the religious community actually laid the foundation of this mindset of right hand being good versus left hand being bad. But it wasn't just found in Christianity. You also see this in Islam.
When one of you eats, let him eat with his right hand. When he drinks, let him drink with his right hand.
Now, in the 1840s, going into like the mid to late 1800s, there was a guy by the name of Rogers Spencer. He is credited for the Spencerian penmanship program, and basically it taught how to write. And I'm going to show you an image of, and I want to see if you notice something on how these students are sitting. You notice that they all are positioned the same way. It's a slant, and they're all slanted a certain way to ensure that they are writing with their right hand. In fact, they said that writing with your right hand was orderly. And forgot to mention that Platt Rogers Spencer, he was a Christian educator. So he was simply echoing what was being taught by these church fathers, what was laid out in scripture. Now, from 1890 to the early 1900s, you had a guy by the name of Austin Norman Palmer, and he is credited with coming up with the Palmer method. This is another educator who taught students how to write. He said, by writing with your right hand, it instills discipline and character. And an assistant superintendent of one of the schools where his program was being implemented had this to say:
"It is highly desirable that left-handed writers should be made right-handed. I advise you to further the teacher's efforts, as from long experience, I am convinced that left-handed penmen are at a disadvantage."
Now, in the 1930s, there was another educator. Well, he wasn't an educator. He was a psychologist, and by the name of Sir Cyril Burt. And he said this in regards to people who were left-handed. He called them fumblers and bumblers. These people really had it for people who were left-handed for some particular reason, but I think we might know why as we continue. Let's move on to the next person. Next, this is in 1940, and this is a guy by the name of Dr. Abram Blau. He was a psychiatrist in the New York public school system. In his book, The Master's Hand, well, guess what he said in there? He alleged that people or children that write with their left hand, well, he alleged that they would develop personality defects, and he linked the left hand to infantile negativism. Now, in the early 1900s in the Boston public school system, well, they took this even further. I'm telling you, these people really had it in for left-handed people. And they were so aggressive with this in the Boston public school system, they would actually incorporate corporal punishment. Yeah, corporal punishment. One of the things they would do was to actually tie the child's left hand to the desk to make sure that they did not write, that they only wrote with their right hand. Another thing now this is where it gets even darker, is that they would actually use a ruler. If they caught you writing with your left hand, they would actually use a ruler, make you ball your fists and hit you across your knuckles. Now, when I was reading this, it kind of took me back a little, because I remember as a child in the 70s, this was, oh man, I was a young thing. And this was in a daycare. My teacher, because of something I didn't do or whatever, I remember my teacher taking a wood ruler, telling me to ball my fists, and she whacked me a few times across my knuckles. And now I know, now I got the connection. It had nothing to do with writing, but I'm saying, who inspired you to do that kind of discipline? It was these people. So now we're at the key question of this video here. I mean, again, why is this so important? Left hand versus right hand, and why were people so adamant that people only function or mainly function with their right hand? It simply comes to one thing: compliance. Let's take a look. Remember, we said earlier in the video, I said we're going to take a closer look at the left functions of the brain and the right functions of the brain. So let's take a look. So for starters, here's the thing. For years, scientists used to say that your left side of your brain had specific functions that were uniquely different to the right side of the brain. Well, as years going on and they've looked into this further, they found that in many ways, both the left and the right hemispheres, they actually share responsibilities. However, there are certain things that the left side of the brain tends to skew towards, right? And likewise, the right side of the brain, it tends to skew on those responsibilities. What responsibilities am I talking about? Let's kind of take a look here. Now, the left side of your brain, it tends to operate on things like this, like obedience, literalism, rule following, deference to authority. Now, the right side of your brain, well, guess what that deals with? It's artistic expression, abstract thought, questioning norms, non-linear thinking. Another area is big picture thinking. Now, with this information I just gave you, now hopefully you're starting to put some things together. So remember what we said earlier, right side or right hemisphere controls the left motor skills of your hand and all of that. The left hemisphere controls the right side. All right. So what we just said here is we just described this entire system that goes all the way in ancient times that made sure that you wrote with your right hand. All right. So if you're writing with your right hand, that means the left side of your brain is the one that is getting the most work. And so what did we describe just now? What's going on in the left hand? Let's go through it again. Obedience. Let me say that again. Obedience, literalism, rule following, deference to authority. Okay. So your left side of your brain is the one that if you want a population to be obedient, if you want them to be compliant, you're going to want to make sure that they are functioning primarily with their right hand. All right. You don't want them thinking too much, exercising the right hemisphere, which would be your left hand, because if you do that, then they're thinking out of the box. They're being more creative, right? They're questioning things. They're exploring and all of that. And you definitely don't want that if you're trying to control a population. So just imagine within a Christian construct or, in a church, you got a church full of people who are questioning things. They're not just coming there and being compliant. If the preacher's up there saying all whatever it is that they're saying, and if the preacher makes some mistakes, the last thing that preacher wants is a whole congregation of people questioning them and saying, well, wait a minute, I don't necessarily see it that way. Or you get a teacher that's in the classroom that's teaching mathematics a certain way, but you have a student or students that are saying, you know what? That's a good way. That's one way of doing it. But I'm sitting here thinking there's 5 other ways you can do it as well. Well, the teacher and the system going to say, no, we don't. You got to follow this way and this way only. So what are some of the things we can do to fix this? You may think, like many other people think this way, that, well, I've been right-handed all my life and that's pretty much how it's going to be. Well, no, that's not how it has to be. In fact, you can actually start exercising your left hand if you're a right-hander or vice versa. There are all kinds of exercises that you can start incorporating starting now. Doesn't matter what your age is. You can start incorporating some of these exercises now. So, for example, in my case, I'm a right-hander. In some of your cases, you may be a left-hander. What I've been doing is starting to challenge myself by starting to do writing exercises with my left hand. If you're a right hand or if you're a left-hander, start challenging yourself by writing things with your right hand. So this falls right in line with what we've been teaching in our free course over on Samba University, is that our goal here on this platform is to get people to fully maximize their brains, our brains, right? So even, so for people who are left-handers, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are always big thinkers and they're always questioning authority. Not necessarily, because remember, like I said, the left and the right hemispheres of your brain, they are sharing these different roles and responsibilities. It's just that the right tends to skew more on one side and the left tends to skew on the other side. So even if you're a left-hander and you think that, man, that means I'm a big thinker, I'm this, that, or whatever, you're still not optimizing the full functions of your brain. So what we're saying, it applies to both people regardless. So So again, these exercises are very good so that you can fully optimize what's up here. So I know you definitely can't see this because of the lighting and all of that, but that's okay. Trust me though, it's not blank. I have like sheets that I have printed out where I've been doing this for weeks now, where I have been practicing how to write with my left hand, well, my least dominant hand. And I'm gonna tell you, at first my stuff was looking like chicken scratch. My hand was hurting and all of that, and it just was not. It just definitely was not. It was looking crazy. And it's something that I would do, every now and then, just kind of just if I was bored or something like that, I would try it out or whatever. But I didn't realize the connection to all of this. But I have been very just very adamant in doing this time around. So I can tell, number one, with my handwriting, I could tell my handwriting with my left hand has drastically improved. I mean, it actually looks a lot clearer and it's getting a lot closer to how I write with my right hand. And you can be here on YouTube and do some searches. You'll find people doing this all the time, teaching themselves how to be ambidextrous. And anybody can do that. It's not just something that you're born with. It's something that you can train yourself to do. Another thing I do besides writing is, like, when it comes to brushing my teeth, of course, I've always, for years and years and years, I've always brushed my teeth with my right hand. But for a few weeks now, I've been using my left hand to brush my teeth, and it's getting easier and easier to do that. And I think about any of the other things I normally do with my right hand, I'm starting to switch with my left hand. I remember this one time I was in Costco with my wife, and there was a hook from a song that I was like, had been listening to. And, sometimes I can be in my own world and I'm snapping with my right hand. But I noticed this time I caught myself. I was like, oh my goodness. The only reason why I caught myself is because my fingers were hurting. I was snapping with my left hand, which I don't normally do, but I was just doing it. And it was literally what was happening was this part of my brain was starting to become more active now because I was being more intentional about it. And so even things that I wasn't even thinking about, it just started lining up in place. Now, what are some of the things that I've noticed in my own life by doing these exercises? I'm not going to sit here and tell you that now I've figured out and solved all the problems of the world, because I'm not there yet. But what I have noticed is I feel when it comes to bringing a bit more order, if you were to see my desk, my desk tends to be a bit messy. And a lot of times they say your room or your environment oftentimes reflect on how it is in here. And so I've noticed that I've been a lot clearer in terms of how I think and how I prioritize certain things. Another thing I've noticed is that when I've found it to be a bit easier to get motivated, when I see a lot of different things out there that can easily demotivate you, that can really take a lot of wind out of your sails. But I'm telling you, this lately, I've been noticing that my motivation level has actually gone up, is increased. And if you take some time, on YouTube or listen, to other people, they have other things that they have begun to notice as well. Again, the whole object of this is to optimize your brain. It's not, again, we're not saying that you're going to turn into a math whiz or anything like that, but it's about brain optimization. And these people that we just went through in this video, they all knew that by forcing people to use exclusively one side, their right hand, it was going to make these people it was going to make society a lot more compliant, following the rules that were given to them and not having any kind of proclivity to think outside the box. These people were very intentional and they knew exactly what they were doing. And so what the encouragement I hope you get out of this video is to begin to challenge yourself by using your less dominant hand, LDH. And, if it's your right hand, if it's your left hand, it doesn't matter. Begin to challenge yourself on this. What I do is I take a few minutes out of the day, maybe 10, 15 minutes a day, at the beginning of the day. And then towards the evening, I just do a few practice drills, with that. And then in the evening as well, I also have a ball that we have here, and I'll just, throw catches to myself with my left hand or my less dominant hand, and just getting used to that. So try things like that. And I'm going to tell you, you're going to start noticing some difference. And so one of the things we talked about in our video series, we talked about how the gray matter, this is where all your neurons, this is where all that thinking and stuff goes on. And if you're not challenging yourself, this is the last thing I want to leave with you. If you're not challenging yourself, if you're not challenging your brain, when you're writing like that, when you're writing with your less dominant hand, when you're doing that, you're actually rewiring your brain. You're literally are upgrading your brain. I mean, we upgrade our computers all the time. We need to start focusing on upgrading our brains. And when you do that, the gray matter, where all those neurons are, it begins to thicken. And as it's thickened, you're giving it more space for new ideas and new inspirations and all of that to literally happen. So physically, the gray matter, where all those neurons are located, is actually beginning to thicken when you start doing things like this. So again, you want to upgrade your brain, you want to break out of the matrix thinking, try challenging yourself by writing or beginning to use your less dominant hand. Okay, I think that about wraps it up. Thank you so much for tuning into this video. Share whatever thoughts you have in the comments below, and thank you so much. Hey, you guys take care, and I'll see you again soon.